because we're now joined via Zoom from Accra, the capital, by our reporter, Khaya Khumalo. Khaya, great to see you. Akwaba, you look very Ghanaian tonight.
Well, very much so, Peter. That is a buzzword. You know, you can really feel the excitement in the Ghanaian capital as the leaders are meeting really to look at the critical issues facing the continent. The major issue, of course, is around food insecurity, and this has been largely precipitated by the current situation between Russia and Ukraine, the conflicts really that has severely disrupted the global supply chains in terms of the soya beans, the wheat, and of course the maize. And just to quote the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Adesina, he said, Africa will try by all means to try and avert this particular crisis, but also speaking about the concerted effort, for example, also of tackling some long-standing challenges around climate change, Peter. We've seen very devastating scenes in South Africa and KwaZulu-Natal, and also that was also a very dominant issue here, that how can Africa really build economies that are also climate change resilient, but also making sure that they take into account the issue of making sure that in terms of the energy being used, it's a low carbon energy in terms of the renewables as opposed to the coal-fired, energy.
All right, so food really at the top of the agenda. What have they said that they will do? We're hearing about this $1.5 billion that will be given to 20 million farmers. How much do we know about how this will work and how this will help with this food crisis?
So certainly the modalities so far are yet really to be revealed. But when we spoke to the vice president of the bank, there was a clear indication that there will be accountability in terms of the allocation of the funds, especially to the member states who are running this particular bank. And something also that we have been alerted around this particular meeting is the board of governors of the bank as well have been meeting to try and make sure that they prioritize this issue. We do know that there are some over 40 African economies that are terribly vulnerable to the current situation. But so far, the farmers will be supported, the fertilizers will be on the ground. Once again, to quote President Adesina, he said, Africa really doesn't need food aid. So the agriculture really should be a very pivotal sector that is uplifting the continent from this particular mayhem. Apart from that, something that is quite significant at this point, Peter, is the issue of making sure that also they do make use of the land in the continent. Africa does have the most arable land in the world, so that should be really used, especially like where we are in Ghana. It's a very green part of Africa, so there's quite a host of plans really to tap into these resources so that the continent can really just move and be able to, just avoid this particular looming food crisis that may also trigger the social unrest. So it is a major concern for the leaders, but also, for example, you do have countries like Ethiopia and also Sudan where already these seeds have been planted to try and avoid a catastrophic situation.
All right. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about the food. And you said, yes, 65% of the global arable land is on the continent. They have this Feed Africa High Fives program, I believe, that has already helped something in the order of 76 million farmers. How is this work impacting? Have they given an idea of the work that they've done so far and how they hope this $1.5 billion will further assist?
So the main responsibility will be with the vulnerable countries to approach the bank. And something quite interesting in this regard is they do have this facility in terms of their concessional loans, but also they won't be incurring any debts in this particular instance. There was a clear assurance from President Adesina that this is their very just rapid response because in fact he quoted that very terrible time in Africa right at the height of COVID-19, where the continent really was caught napping in terms of really being able to act quite swiftly in dealing with the pandemic. So this time, he says, they're fully ready, they're really getting these resources, but the very important issue here will be around the proactiveness of the member states to approach the bank to present the very strong plans that will be able to be bankable, so that the bank will be able to buy in and have a buy-in in terms of what they are planning to do. But something also that is very important is around, of course, making sure that they deal with other challenges as well that are still facing the continent.
Yeah, those are the challenges I wanted to ask you about, is that it can't just be food security. What else is on the agenda? We know that Ukraine and Russia, that conflict has had a wide effect, not just on cereals, but other areas as well.
Well, that's right, Peter, because in the continent you do have countries that heavily rely on Russia and Ukraine and many other parties that have been affected by the ongoing conflict. But also another very critical issue that has been quite dominant in the discussions is around the just energy transition, for the continent to be able to really tap into some of the resources that we have in our disposal, especially when you look at the solar energy and many other streams as well that are very important that won't be affecting the continent. So not far from where we are in the Sahel region, for example, the bank has been investing quite heavily. So they do have a project, they call it Power to Desert, one of the hottest parts of Africa really, where they're using the sun as a main energy. But also in terms of South Africa, President Adesina, for example, was talking about South Africa's plan to move from the coal-fired energy to more renewable streams, saying that South Africa at this particular point would need about $25 to be able to facilitate this process, and really commending South Africa for initiating this particular effort, but also talking about how they still do support South Africa's initiatives. When you look at Medupi Power Station, for example, the bank has been a very instrumental partner in terms of assisting South Africa be able to manage this particular area.
Are there any other areas that the bank is assisting? We've talked about energy, we've talked about agriculture, which are huge, but I would imagine infrastructure continues to be an ongoing thing on the continent. Has that been put on the table at this meeting?
Well, by all means, Peter, the issue of the infrastructure backlog in the continent, it's always really a main issue, and it is a big hindrance in terms of really when you talk about intra-Africa trade, it's always that particular issue that will always surface. So undoubtedly, the leaders are looking at really how do they try and deal with some of the bottlenecks so that they unleash the economic growth and be able to revive the African economies. And also, in fact, tomorrow, around 10 o'clock Ghanaian time, there will be a round table where some African leaders will be looking at ways really of reviving the economies, exploring the green economy as one of the very main anchors in this regard. But apart from that, really, it's always important to engage with these leaders in terms of the time frames, in terms of their plans, but also in terms of really making sure that this really goes down to the Africans who are really bearing the brunt of all these socioeconomic issues.
All right. I mean, this is the AFDB's annual meeting, but who is there, perhaps beyond the AFDB and its people?
Well, we do believe at this particular point in time, traditionally a hosting leader in this regard, the Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo, is expected to attend the sessions, but also we do understand also that Mozambican President as well is in town, President Nyusi, and some leaders as well. But obviously it comes at a very critical point because there are so many global events as well happening elsewhere. But the countries that are not represented by the heads of states or the prime ministers or the president. We do understand the finance ministers are attending on behalf of their principals, especially because this particular bank has positioned itself as a very indispensable partner in terms of pushing development in the continent. In fact, just a short while ago, Peter, we went to one of the facilities not far from the Ghanaian capital, where there is this massive interchange. So it's all about really making sure that there's development, but also easing the traffic congestion. One of the biggest challenges really facing quite a number of the African cities, once it's the peak time, moving from one point to the other, it's always quite a very enormous challenge. But by virtue of this interchange, not far from the CBD here in the Ghanaian city, hopefully it's going to really bring change, but also urbanizing the space, making sure that they really move the urban areas as well, so that they see the prosperity.
All right, so, okay, so perhaps to wrap up, I guess overall the focus really on energy and climate resilience. That's kind of what they're sitting to put on in the pot, and to see if they can come up with solutions.
Well, that's right, Peter, because the meeting really comes at a very pivotal time. So a lot of the delegates here, they're talking about the concurrent crises. You look at the rising fuel price, the rising food prices, but also just the rising financial conditions really affecting quite a number of Africans. In fact, according to the data now, in terms of now the Africans, in light of all these challenges that you have seen, from COVID-19 to other challenges as well, to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and Russia. Now, we know that over 55 million Africans are at the risk of facing poverty. And of course, this is a very extra burden for the continent, because we've seen for the longest time all these challenges really just existing. But these are the newly added problems that really are exacerbating what is a very sad situation.
Khaya, great to have you on the program and seeing you all the way from Accra there. As they say in a local language there, Medasi. Thank you very much.